What happens when an actor steps in front of the camera knowing time may already be running out? Some performances feel powerful when we first watch them, but become almost unbearable once we learn the truth behind them. These were not just roles, they were final battles, quiet goodbyes, and moments of courage hidden inside famous scenes. Today, we're counting down 15 tragic scenes made by actors who knew they were dying. And number one may hit harder than anyone expects. Diana Rigg as Ms. Collins in Last Night in Soho, 2021. The most chilling twist in Last Night in Soho becomes even heavier when you realize it was also Diana Rigg's final curtain call. For most of the film, Ms. Collins appears like a strict but ordinary landlady, the kind of older figure who seems to belong to another London, another era, another memory. But when the truth finally rises to the surface, Rigg's performance changes from quiet mystery into something wounded, bitter, and almost ghost-like. She is not simply playing a woman with secrets. She is playing someone haunted by a lifetime of pain, survival, and buried anger. That is what makes the scene so tragic in hindsight. Rigg had spent decades commanding screens and stages with elegance, authority, and steel. And here she returns in a role that feels like a haunted farewell to old glamour itself. Edgar Wright later spoke proudly about working with her on what became her final film appearance, and the movie is dedicated to her memory. The scene works as horror, but after her death, it feels more like a goodbye, whispered through neon light. Vincent Price as the inventor in Edward Scissorhands, 1990. Sometimes a performance breaks your heart because the actor barely needs to act at all. In Edward Scissorhands, Vincent Price plays the gentle inventor who creates Edward with kindness, curiosity, and a strange fatherly tenderness. His screen time is short, but every second feels precious. He moves through the role with a fragile warmth, like a storybook grandfather building beauty inside a lonely castle. Then comes the devastating moment. The inventor prepares to give Edward real hands, the one gift that could make him complete. But death interrupts before the act of love can be finished. Edward is left unfinished forever, and the audience is left with one of Tim Burton's saddest images. What makes it more painful is knowing this was one of Price's final screen appearances. The legendary horror icon, once famous for booming menace and elegant villainy, appears here softened, weakened, and deeply human. His presence gives the scene a real-life ache. It is not just the death of a character, it is the fading of an entire cinematic era. Ingrid Bergman as Charlotte Andergast in Autumn Sonata, 1978. This is not a death scene, but it may be one of the most emotionally naked performances ever given by an actor facing her own mortality. In Autumn Sonata, Ingrid Bergman plays Charlotte Andergast, a famous pianist whose polished elegance hides a devastating emotional failure. She has neglected the daughter who still carries the wounds of being unloved. The film is built almost like a confession chamber, with mother and daughter locked in painful conversation until every polite mask begins to crack. Bergman's face does extraordinary work here. She does not overplay Charlotte's guilt. She lets it flicker, resist, retreat, and return. That restraint makes the performance feel brutally real. During this period, Bergman was battling breast cancer, and the knowledge gives the film a haunting extra layer. Charlotte is a woman being forced to look back at the cost of her choices, while Bergman herself was nearing the last chapter of a monumental career. The tragedy is not loud. It is intimate, controlled, and devastating. Her final major film role feels like an artist staring directly into regret. Raul Julia as M. Bison in Street Fighter, 1994. The movie may be wild, colorful, and over the top, but Raul Julia's performance carries something strangely heroic behind the madness. In Street Fighter, Julia plays M. Bison with theatrical fire, treating a video game villain as if he were standing on a Shakespearean battlefield. Every gesture is grand, every line feels carved in stone, but the scene that still follows viewers is his infamous confrontation with Chun-Li, where Bison remembers the destruction of her village not as a defining evil, but as a forgettable day. It is cruel, ridiculous, chilling, and unforgettable all at once. What makes the performance tragic is the real-life context around it. Julia was seriously ill during the final stretch of his life, Yet he gave the role full commitment instead of treating it like disposable material. That dedication turned what could have been a cartoon villain into a strange final monument of energy. He knew how to make even absurd dialogue feel alive. The result is bittersweet. A dying actor giving a performance so alive that it outlasted the movie itself. Jason Robards as Earl Partridge in Magnolia, 1999. Few scenes feel as uncomfortable as watching a dying man confess when there is no time left to repair what he broke. In Magnolia, Jason Robards plays Earl Partridge, a wealthy television producer lying in bed, ravaged by illness, drifting between medication, memory, regret, and fear. His body is failing, but his guilt is wide awake. Earl's scenes are not glamorous movie death scenes. They are messy, breathless, vulnerable, and painfully human. He rambles, breaks down, remembers the woman he betrayed, and realizes that success has not protected him from the truth of his own choices. Robards had already survived serious illness in his life, and he would die the following year, which makes the performance feel almost too close to reality. The genius of the scene is that it refuses easy sympathy. Earl is not cleaned up for the audience. He is shown as a man at the end, desperate for forgiveness he may not deserve. That is why this performance lingers. It turns a hospital bed into a courtroom, and regret becomes the final witness. Pete Postlethwaite as Morris Fisher in Inception, 2010. In a film full of dreams, collapsing worlds, and impossible architecture, one of the saddest moments is simply a dying father beside his son. Pete Postlethwaite appears in Inception as Maurice Fisher, the powerful businessman whose fractured relationship with his son becomes the emotional target of the entire mission. The scene is brief, but it carries enormous weight. Robert Fisher reaches toward the memory of a father who always seemed cold and impossible to please, only to find a final message that suggests love was buried beneath all that distance. Whether the moment is real, manipulated, or emotionally engineered, it still lands because Postlethwaite gives Morris a ghostly presence. He looks frail, distant, almost already gone. That detail becomes more painful knowing Postlethwaite was in the final stage of his life and died months after the film's release. His performance does not demand attention. It quietly wounds you. In a movie obsessed with planting ideas, this scene plants the cruelest one. Sometimes the words we need most arrive too late. Catherine Coulson as the log lady in Twin Peaks, The Return, 2017. Some goodbyes are written into the script, but others feel like they are coming from somewhere much deeper. Catherine Coulson's Return as the log lady in Twin Peaks. The Return is one of those rare television moments where fiction and real life seem to stand in the same room. For years, Margaret Lanterman had been one of Twin Peaks' strangest and most beloved figures, a woman carrying a log, speaking in riddles, warning others about darkness before they understood it themselves. But in her final scenes, the mystery fades into something heartbreakingly human. Her voice is weak, her face is fragile, yet her presence remains powerful, almost spiritual, as if she is still guarding the town from a darkness she can no longer fight physically. Coulson was battling cancer during this final return, and David Lynch captured her with enormous tenderness. The scene where she tells Deputy Hawk that death is near does not feel like ordinary dialogue. It feels like an artist saying goodbye through the character that made her unforgettable. What makes it tragic is how calm it is. No loud drama, no forced tears, just a woman, a phone call, and the quiet knowledge that the forest is closing in. It is not just one of Twin Peaks' saddest scenes. It is one of its most honest. Pedro Armendáriz as Ali Karim Bey in From Russia with Love, 1963. Behind one of James Bond's most charismatic allies was a man fighting pain the audience was never meant to see. In From Russia with Love, Pedro Armendáriz plays Ali Karim Bey with humor, authority, warmth, and danger. He is not just another side character helping Bond move from one set piece to another. He feels alive, experienced, and deeply rooted in the world around him. That is what makes his final presence in the film so painful in hindsight. During production, Armendáriz was seriously ill with cancer, yet he continued working because he wanted to secure money for his family. The crew reportedly rearranged filming so his scenes could be completed before his condition worsened. Knowing that changes everything about the performance. When Karim Bey jokes, fights, guides Bond through Istanbul, and carries himself with that effortless confidence, you are watching an actor refusing to let illness steal his dignity on screen. The tragedy is not in one single dramatic speech. It is in the contrast between the character's vitality and the actor's private suffering. Armendariz gives the film charm and humanity, even as his own life was nearing its final chapter. His work reminds us that sometimes the bravest performance is the one where the pain stays invisible, but the courage fills every frame. Massimo Troisi as Mario Ruopolo in Il Postino, 1994. Few final performances feel as gentle, poetic, and devastating as Massimo Troisi's work in Il Postino. He plays Mario Ruopolo, a shy postman on a quiet Italian island who becomes connected to the exiled poet Pablo Neruda. At first, Mario seems simple, almost invisible, a man who delivers letters but does not know how to deliver his own heart. Then slowly, through poetry, friendship, and love, he begins to find language for everything he has been unable to say. That transformation is beautiful on its own, but the real-life story behind it turns the film into something almost unbearable. Troisi was seriously ill during production and reportedly delayed needed heart surgery so he could finish the movie. He knew completing the film came at a terrible personal cost, yet he continued because the story mattered to him. That knowledge gives Mario's quiet scenes a heartbreaking glow. Every smile feels borrowed. Every pause feels fragile. Every line about love, poetry, and memory seems to carry the weight of a man trying to leave something behind. Troisi died shortly after filming was completed, making Il Postino not just his final performance, but a final act of artistic devotion. The film is tender, but behind that tenderness is a sacrifice that makes it unforgettable. Richard Farnsworth as Alvin Straight in The Straight Story, 1999. Richard Farnsworth did not need dramatic speeches to make pain visible. He carried it in the way he moved. In The Straight Story, he plays Alvin Straight, an elderly man who travels hundreds of miles on a lawnmower to visit his estranged brother after learning he has suffered a stroke. The premise sounds almost simple, even strange, but the film becomes something deeply moving because Farnsworth makes Alvin feel completely real. His body is slow. His face is weathered. His silences say more than most actors could say with pages of dialogue. What makes the performance tragic is that Farnsworth was suffering from terminal cancer during filming. The physical pain you see in Alvin's journey was not just acting technique, it was close to the actor's own reality. That gives the film a rare emotional honesty. When Alvin talks about age, regret, pride, family, and the mistakes men carry for too long, it feels less like scripted wisdom and more like a final confession. David Lynch's direction is gentle, never exploitative, allowing Farnsworth's dignity to lead every scene. By the time Alvin reaches his brother, the moment is almost wordless. And that is why it destroys you. Two old men sit beneath the stars, and a lifetime of stubborn silence finally breaks. Spencer Tracy as Matt Drayton in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1967. Spencer Tracy's final monologue does not feel like a scene anymore. It feels like a man saying farewell with everyone he loved watching. In Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Tracy plays Matt Drayton, a liberal newspaper publisher forced to confront his own beliefs when his daughter announces she is engaged to a black doctor. The film builds toward Matt's final speech, where he weighs love, fear, prejudice, family, and the courage required to stand by what is right. On the page, it is a powerful, dramatic moment. But on screen, it becomes something almost sacred because Tracy was gravely ill during filming. His health was so fragile that production carried real risk, and Katharine Hepburn, his longtime partner, is visibly emotional in the scene. That emotional truth gives the monologue a second heartbeat. Tracy is not only speaking as Matt Drayton, he is summoning the strength of a legendary career, standing before the camera one last time and leaving behind a final statement about love. He died shortly after filming ended, and Hepburn reportedly never watched the completed film because the memories were too painful. That makes the scene one of Hollywood's most haunting farewells. Controlled, brave, and quietly shattering. John Cazale as Stan in The Deer Hunter, 1978. John Cazale never wasted a frame, and in The Deer Hunter, that fact becomes almost painful to remember. He plays Stan, one of the working-class friends whose lives are changed forever by war, fear, loyalty, and the emotional damage that follows them home. Stan is not the loudest character in the film, but Cazale gives him a nervous, vulnerable presence that makes him feel heartbreakingly human. He is insecure, proud, sometimes foolish, and always searching for his place among stronger personalities. But the real tragedy is what was happening behind the camera. Cazale was battling terminal cancer during production, and his condition was so serious that the filmmakers reportedly arranged to shoot his scenes early. There were even insurance concerns because of his illness, but those around him understood that this performance mattered. Meryl Streep, his partner, stood beside him through that final chapter, and the knowledge gives every scene a deeper ache. Cazale died before The Deer Hunter was released, meaning audiences watched his final performance without him ever seeing its impact. In a film already filled with loss, his presence becomes a ghostly reminder that some actors leave not through grand farewell speeches, but through small, precise moments of truth. Stan may not be the film's hero, but Cazale makes him unforgettable. A frightened ordinary man played by an extraordinary artist running out of time. Chadwick Boseman as Levy Green in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, 2020. Chadwick Boseman's final performance does not feel like acting. It feels like fire trapped inside a man who knows the clock is cruel. In Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, he plays Levy Green, a gifted, ambitious trumpet player desperate to be heard in a world that keeps pushing him down. Levy laughs, boasts, flirts, dreams, and explodes, but underneath all that swagger is a wound that never stops bleeding. The scene that cuts deepest is his breakdown, when Levy turns his rage toward God, demanding answers for a lifetime of pain, humiliation, and injustice. It is a terrifyingly raw moment, not because it is loud, but because it feels ripped from somewhere dangerous and private. Boseman was secretly battling colon cancer while making the film, and most of the world had no idea. That truth changes the performance forever. Every burst of energy feels miraculous. Every flash of anger feels like a man pouring his remaining strength into art. He lost weight, fought illness, and still delivered one of the most powerful final roles of modern cinema. What makes it tragic is that Levy is a man begging the world to recognize his life before it is too late. After Boseman's death, that cry became almost unbearable. His final screen performance became a masterclass, a warning, and a farewell all at once. Tony Todd as William Bloodworth in Final Destination, Bloodlines, 2025. Tony Todd spent decades warning characters that death always collects, and his final return made that warning feel painfully personal. In the Final Destination series, Todd's William Bloodworth was never just a mysterious mortician. He was the voice of fate itself, calm, grave, and strangely compassionate, explaining the rules of death with a presence that could freeze a room. In Final Destination, Bloodlines, his appearance carries a different weight because it came near the end of Todd's life, after he had been battling serious illness. The scene reportedly allowed him to give Bloodworth a more emotional farewell than fans expected, turning a horror cameo into something closer to a final message. That is what makes the moment so powerful. Todd was famous for making fear sound elegant. His voice could turn one sentence into a prophecy. But here, the character's long history with death becomes impossible to separate from the actor's own mortality. Instead of feeling like another franchise callback, the scene lands like a curtain closing on one of horror's most distinctive presences. Todd gave genre fans decades of menace, warmth, and unforgettable authority. His final appearance reminds us that sometimes horror icons do not leave with screams. Sometimes they leave with a calm look, a familiar voice, and the haunting feeling that they knew exactly what goodbye meant. Camar de los Reyes as Coach Montes in All-American, 2024. The most heartbreaking final performances are not always in giant movies. Sometimes they happen quietly, in a television scene viewers do not realize is a goodbye. Camar de los Reyes appeared as Coach Montes in All-American, bringing strength, maturity, and grounded presence to a world built around pressure, ambition, young athletes, and second chances. His role was not designed as a grand tragic farewell, and that is exactly why it hurts. He appears with the calm authority of someone guiding others forward, while in real life he was facing a brief but devastating battle with cancer. Reports after his death revealed that he had continued working close to the end, making his final screen presence feel deeply personal in hindsight. There is something uniquely painful about watching an actor play steadiness while his own life is becoming fragile. Coach Montes represents discipline, leadership, and emotional control, the kind of person others lean on. But behind the performance was a man still giving his craft everything he had. That contrast makes the scene tragic without needing melodrama. It is not about a deathbed speech or a dramatic final line. It is about dedication. It is about showing up. It is about an artist leaving one more piece of himself on screen before anyone fully understood what they were witnessing. And that is why this final entry hits hardest, because real courage often looks quiet until the truth arrives later. And that's what makes these scenes so unforgettable. They were not just performances. They were final sparks from artists who gave everything while quietly fighting time itself. Now tell me, which scene hit you the hardest after learning the truth behind it? Drop your thoughts below, and if you want more emotional Hollywood stories, make sure you subscribe.